All right. So welcome to the second day of Flutter Europe. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I know that there was a party last night, so the brave souls who have made it here, I really appreciate you fighting through that hangover and those late nights and getting here at 9:30 in the morning to get this kicked off with the tale of RxDart. My name is Brian Egan. I am sort of an open source person, and I work a lot on RxDart. I'm kind of the co-author with another person named Frank. And yeah, we've been making a lot of changes to Rx over the past few years, and I just thought it'd be fun to share that journey of sort of more like what we've been doing and why we've been doing these things and the problems we were trying to solve as we've made changes to the library. And so I'm not sure if this is going to be the most practical talk about Rx, like if you're like wondering how to maybe use different operators. Philip and I actually gave a talk last year at ReactiveConf, and you can check that out. Today, it's going to be more of a storytelling time and hopefully kind of sharing just what it's like to kind of go through a dev experience and hopefully encourage others to help share the problems they're trying to solve and how they're solving those problems, because I think it's just fun to hear these stories sometimes. So when I started with Flutter in the beginning, there wasn't so much out there when it came to architecture and state management. And so I'd kind of read an article about Flutter in like 2016, late 2016, and like it was about Fuchsia actually, and it mentioned Flutter, and I was kind of like a little bored with Android development, I was a little bored with web development, so I was like, oh, let's try this Flutter thing out and see how it works. And it was really cool. I really liked it, right? We all like the hot reload, and we all like how fast the iteration is, but there weren't a lot of tools for how to maybe think about architecture and think about these types of problems of testing and things like that. And so I just started throwing spaghetti at the wall. You know, you might have seen some presentations I've given on Block and Redux in the past, and these were things I was trying. But really where I began with streams was actually by taking inspiration from a library called Cycle.js, which is a JavaScript library. And it sort of defines an interaction in three parts, and it's called the model, view, intent. And the whole point about it is that you have a view, which is, of course, like your widgets, and that's kind of what you show to the user. And the widgets can actually trigger these things called intents. And you can think about these as like events or actions in other, you know, intents is just a specific name, but you can think about it just as the view essentially sending data to the model. And then the model would process that data and emit a new state, essentially, so a new view state. And so this is the cycle within Cycle.js. And these are all actually implemented in streams. So that was how Cycle works, is that you pass a variety of streams into a model function, and it returns a stream of view state. So that's kind of what the goal was. That was like one of my original goals when I was playing around with Redux and Scope Model, and I wanted to try stream-based architectures. This was sort of what I was personally trying before I'd heard about the block pattern, which was introduced about a year later at Google, DartConf by Google. So I did what anyone would do, which is you look at their sample documentation, and for Cycle, they have this like BMI calculator, so your body mass index calculator, and this is basically just like a ratio between your weight and your height to give you sort of a general idea of how in shape you are. Not that in shape for me, just to let you know. So the BMI counter, this is all we were trying to create. Super simple app, right? Really not much to it. So let's go ahead and dive in. I wanted to start with my tests. So as I always do, you'll probably always see me start my presentations with testing, because especially when I was first learning streams and learning about them, tests were a way for me to really help understand exactly how streams were working. And so I basically created like 3 tests or that kind of tested this thing. And so the first one was just that, hey, when someone listens to the model, it should deliver an initial value. And so what I did is I went through and I created a weight and height variable. And actually, I'm kind of omitting new keywords for the brevity of the slides, but everything here would have a new keyword because this was Dart 1 pre-strong, or like kind of like early strong typing, I guess. So we didn't have full static typing just yet and full sound types yet as well. So it was kind of an interesting time to be in Dart, where you had strong typing, but it wasn't quite there. So we'll create 2 streams, and we're kind of doing an odd thing here where we create 2 stream controllers and just grabbing the stream, because we actually don't want these streams to emit any data. So it's a little weird looking, but that's what I was going for. And then I was passing those streams into a function, the model function, and I'll just call this the BMI model function. And what I was doing at that point is I was using this expect one, async one callback from the Dart test package to listen to the stream and expect that it would eventually emit this BMI state object. And so a BMI state object is just like basically the view state that we talked about earlier in the first step. Now, the only reason I threw the slide ins in there is because this is just one of those things I was really happy about during the progression of my time using Dart. But a month or two later, the Dart team, Natalie, she implemented stream matchers, and so I could move this code already to this code, and it was really nice. And this was just kind of an aha moment for me actually, when I was like, actually, this is really cool. And so I started creating a ton of my own matchers at this point, and I encourage you to do the same. If you find your tests or reading are hard to read. Just a weird little tidbit, but hey, think about creating your own matcher. The second argument to the expect function takes any matcher. It's just an abstract class. You can implement it yourself and create custom matchers. So if you find your tests are a little hard to read, just a random tidbit, think about making a matcher for it. Totally beside the point. So the second test we should have is that when, of course, the wait stream emits a value, we would want to emit a new state. That's the whole point, right? The model's supposed to take in these streams of values, and then when it receives data from these streams, it should emit new states. So in this case, we'll go ahead and change the wait stream up a little bit so that it is a stream of integer, and it'll emit a single integer of 2. And then, of course, we expect our state stream to eventually emit the BMI state in this case. And then, of course, we want to do the same thing for the height. So it's just, in this case, we're just saying we should update the height on change. We're going to go ahead and provide from iterable stream to our function, to our BMI model function, and then we'll expect it to emit through a different one. So just a really kind of simple setup and simple test scenario. Now, when we look at the BMI state class, I just implemented it as kind of a really raw data holder or data container kind of class. And so it just takes in 3 fields, the weight, the height, and calculate BMI, which we'll use as a string. And to make tests pass, I implement the equals and hash code and things like that. And for the BMI model, this is where it gets interesting for us in the context of RxDart. So I started trying to write this function and found with the core stream API, I was actually unable to do it. Because using the core stream API, there's actually no way to combine different streams together in certain ways. And so for me, and in particular, I was looking for a specific way to combine variables together. And that's using something like the Rx combine latest operator, which will listen to multiple streams, and anytime either of them emits a new event, it will run a callback function to process that event and deliver a new value. And so what I really found pretty quickly, just after an hour of coding or something, was that we're actually missing a decent amount. And so I found we're missing combine latest. The other thing is I would need to be able to start with an initial value. And so generally in other Rx environments, you have something like the start with operator, which allows you to say hey, here's a stream. If I haven't received any events just yet, go ahead and kick it off with this first event. Stream from iterable. This is just me complaining, but it just seemed kind of long for a single value. And stream controller with the int stream, which I showed earlier, works, but it doesn't. I don't know. I think if you were to read that code, you would be like, why is this person just creating a stream controller and then grabbing the stream and then just not doing anything with the controller? It just looks a little weird. It doesn't really describe the intent behind what that thing was trying to do, which is that we just want a stream that never really emits any values. So this is when I was reading the Flutter documentation, and they have this kind of great document about embracing the Yak Shave. And so I really took this to heart. And basically, if you don't know what a Yak Shave is essentially you're trying to complete a simple task, but in order to complete that task, you need to complete another task. But in order to complete that task, you need to complete another task. To complete that task, it's so on and so forth, right? You just end up 8 tasks deep to complete something really simple, right? So in this case, I need to write a 10-line function, but I can't quite do it yet. So I'm going to go ahead and embrace this Yak Shave. I'm going to go ahead and dive down this rabbit hole, and I'm going to take the advice from the Flutter team, and I'm going to try to solve this problem the right way. So I first started with an evaluation of what was available at Dart at the time. There were a few packages I looked at. The first one was a package called Frappe, and that's a really cool little package. The other one is actually from the Dart team, the async package. And finally, I looked at RxDart. Now, when it comes to Frappe, I think we can all agree it's a great name for a library because it's short, it's simple, and it stands for functional reactive programming. How good is that? It's so hard to name things, right? Just like sometimes when you see someone who nails it, you just got to take a second to appreciate it. And personally, I think this is one of those times. Let's just take a second to appreciate Dan Schultz's naming. It's good work. It's good work. So I liked Frappe. I liked it right away. I'm a sucker. I'm superficial. And the cool thing about Frappe is it had a really simple structure, actually. So it basically provided two classes. One was called an event stream, which just took in a stream, wrapped it, and provided extra transformers. And these were all actually implemented as raw stream transformers, which is really cool because if you don't know what a stream transformer is, it's literally designed to take one stream and transform it into another stream. And a lot of methods on the stream class and almost all the methods we implement at RxDart are stream transformers. And so this was nice because it was implemented using the core Dart primitives. And I really liked that. I really liked that it stuck to what Dart provided and use those things. And so I thought it was really cool. It was actually quite a simple architecture. Now the problem, as I mentioned earlier, this is when Dart was kind of going through its transition into strong mode and into stronger, stricter typing. So the issue with this library is that it really wasn't built to support that. So it worked really well in a more dynamically typed language, but it didn't really work in this new world. And so I spent like a day or two trying to go through and update it, and I kind of ended up realizing that it would take quite a bit more to update this library to strong mode than maybe was warranted, especially since I wasn't sure if it was really being maintained or if the author was really interested in maintaining it anymore. And so I decided to sort of abandon this effort, but it had such a great name, I had to mention it. The async package. So this is from the Dart team, which is really cool. You can feel like you can trust something from the Dart team. I do have to say on the naming side, this is probably the most confusing package I've ever run into because I didn't understand at first that there was a package called async and then there's core async. It's a little bit weird, but there's some goodies in here and they're helpful. Unfortunately, it just didn't have what I needed. So then I found RxDart and it had what I needed. It was strong mode compliant, which is really good. And it had been maintained regularly. And it was interesting because it actually started out as basically just a wrapper around RxJS. And so that's how it came up with the name RxDart, is that it was essentially just, like I said, a Dart wrapper around the original JS library. But Frank, the original author, was doing a really cool migration, and he was migrating everything to be compatible with the Streams spec. And he had kind of rewritten the library in the last few months to make that work. And I was really happy because it was well tested as well. And that's, I don't know, coming from maybe slightly larger companies, this was really important. And also for me as a beginner, or if I wanted to help contribute to something, tests are really, I think, important for beginners because they can make changes and they can run the tests. And if something breaks, they know, hey, I've done something wrong here. So I really liked what RxDart had to offer. So let's go with Rx then. We can finally implement our model function. So the first thing we'll do is we'll update our tests so we can use some of the things that were provided by Rx out of the box, which was like observable.just. So this is to deliver a single value. So we can get rid of stream.fromIterable. It's about 5 characters shorter. Heck yeah. All right, we're doing it. The height, we can get rid of that weird stream controller thing. And we can just say observable.never. And so hopefully this conveys a bit more information to the person reading the code that this is just a stream that should never emit anything, rather than having this odd stream controller kind of thing going on. So I got a couple of quick wins in my tests, and then I tried to implement the function itself. And so this is where it was really cool, because I was like, all right, so now I've got combined latest, which is what I needed. We've got the ability to use start with, and so I would kick off each of the streams with the ability to start with a single value. And so that way, the width stream, the weight stream will emit 1 right away, and the height stream will emit 1 right away before any input has come in. And then that will trigger essentially this callback function that will create a BMI state. But there's a couple little things that are a little weird here, as you can see. So at this point, what we get in the callback function is a list of dynamic values. And so this was a little funky, so I had to say, like, okay, value 0 as an integer, values 1 as an integer, and then calculate the BMI, which is just a function that'll calculate the BMI, doing the same sort of casting. And so if I do a quick review, we've got our function. It's working, actually. It's good. Tests are starting to pass. But combine latest is returning this list of dynamic, as I said. So that was a bit of a shame, because I wanted that type safety, right? We've got this new strong mode. Dart 2 is coming down the road. We want to embrace strict sound types. Start with, it was just a bit of an interesting one, is that it takes a list rather than taking a single value, which was just a little bit different compared to other implementations. And so there's like a lot of this observable wrapping, right? So you'll see this all the time in Rx code from the past couple of years, right? You have like observable, and this was even weird at this time, because this actually wasn't even the observable class. It was a function that would create an observable internally, set some properties, and then return the observable to you. So it was just like a little bit of a weird function on the side. And so it didn't actually, it wasn't quite as clean as something like Frappe that just wrapped, that just took in a stream as part of its constructor and wrapped it. I really thought it was like, I really liked Frappe for that comparatively. Yeah, so we got it working. But let's go ahead and submit some issues, right? So, hey, can we like make combine latest more strong mode compliant by adding stronger typing there? And like, you know, like may add a constructor that emits a single value. So that's where observable.just came from. And could we start make start with take only a single value? And so it was really cool. Frank, I just really like to thank him, because he was like totally open to these things. And this is the co-author of RxDart. I think I do a lot more speaking than he does publicly, but I really just want to acknowledge and thank Frank for this, like, for everything, but particularly this moment. It was like really cool. Like, I was just getting started with the Flutter community, and this is the first open source, one of the first open source libraries I was working on, and it was really cool. He was just so open to this feedback and so open to helping make improvements. And so yeah, I just want to thank him for everything he's done, and especially for this type of encouragement, because it really encouraged me to start helping maintain and create features and improve RxDart. Yeah, really. And so yeah, so now after Frank's hard work, he just like made the combine latest change in like 2 seconds. I submitted the PR for observable just. We got all that merged. And so there were still a few things that were bugging me. So one of those was that we still had to wrap all these streams in an observable function, which I said was a little weird. To me, it's like if you want something to return an object, it should probably just be a constructor for that object, not a function that sort of creates, I don't know, it's just a little weird. It felt a little JavaScript-y or something. And all transformations were implemented as observables. So basically, you didn't have any stream transformers in the library at all. So basically, if you looked at all the methods, it would essentially just create a brand new stream. And that works fine, but the problem is that if you wanted to use those things independently, so you didn't want to wrap your stream in an observable class, it ended up leading to a really weird API, where if you wanted to have an operation, then do another operation, and do another operation, with stream transformers, you can sort of like read those from top to bottom. But with this setup, you actually had to do almost like nesting, almost like widget nesting. And so you'd have to read from like in to out rather than top to bottom. And it's just a really weird thing. And so I didn't love that. So there were times where like I didn't, you know, I needed maybe one transformer or one method. And I didn't necessarily want to like wrap it in observable and do all this stuff. I just wanted to use it independently. So I thought it would be cool to be able to use the stream transformers independently without doing this whole weird nesting thing. The other thing is we thought it would be cool to be able to use the streams independently, so that basically observable would just, so we'd create all these core streams, and all that would happen is that the observable class could basically do what Frappe did. So even though I spent 2 days working on Frappe and it didn't really lead anywhere, it actually led to this really cool idea, and it helped me realize that Rx could actually benefit from this exact same technique. So what if we change the observable class to just be a simple class that accepts a stream and provides those wrapper methods. And that's exactly what I did. And so I created this refactor, and it was like, yeah, this is like a month after I met Frank as well. So like I said, thanks, Frank. Like, this is really cool. Like, I don't know if like, I'd be so cool if someone just like, hey, I rewrote your library. Thanks, man. But he was so nice about it, and we like talked about it a lot, and it was really, I think it worked out pretty well. And so like I said, the big changes from this were that the observable class is just a wrapper around stream. And this actually was really nice at the time, but it ended up actually being a really lucky decision in some ways as well, as we'll find out in the future. Now, what's kind of cool about this as well is you could import RxDart if Dart for if you wanted everything, like the observable class and the stream transformers and the streams. But if you just wanted to use just the transformers, you could actually import only that part of the package. Or if you wanted to import just the streams, you could import that part of the package. I don't know if anyone actually ever did that. And actually, I think Nate Bosch from the Dart team ended up making a separate package like a few months later that was just called Stream Transform. And it was kind of a bummer because I was like, dang, I did all this work and tried to expose the stream transformers as their own library so that you can import those. But I don't think we made it very visible or very public. Even though we tried to explain it in the documentation, it's always hard. But this actually really helped improve our code. So let's take a look at that BMI model function one more time, right? Okay, so it had all that casting, it had all that wrapping. Let's see what happens now. So in this case, instead of using combine latest, we can use combine latest 2, and that will take in 2 streams, the width and the height, or the weight and the height. Can't get width and height out of my head. And so in this case, we've now got a proper observable class that is taking in the weight stream, and it's starting with 1, no brackets, huge win, yes. We've got the observable, same thing for the height basically, and now our function is much simpler because it knows that it's taking in an integer weight, an integer height, and then you can just use those things to create the BMI state. And so really, I was really happy with this because we quickly made a lot of improvement, I think, to the way that this function was reading before. We got rid of a lot of casting, much more type safe, things like that. So yeah, woo, all right, not bad, not bad. Yeah. You know, it seems petty, but you all love it too. I know it. It's, you all, just a few characters, but it just feels so good, and I don't know why, but it just does. So yeah, not bad, feeling good. But let's check out the Flutter side now. And so, like I said, this is like early 2017. Unfortunately, there was no StreamBuilder. So the way you would have to work with streams at this point was your classic stateful widget, right? And so you would create a state object, and in there, you would have to store a bunch of variables. And so, you'd have to store the model. We'll just go ahead and create the model. But the important things is that you would really have to keep track of the latest state. And you'd also have to keep track of a stream subscription. So this is really important because, I'm not sure if other folks have worked with like subscription-based things before. I'm sure you have. And there's like the classic problem, right? When someone forgets to unsubscribe or to cancel a subscription or dispose of a subscription, whatever it might be, and then you have some like phantom callback running, and it's just odd. And so you might get exceptions. And so it's really important to make sure you manage these stream subscriptions when you listen to the stream and when you cancel the stream. And so that's what we did in init state. We specifically listened to the model, and we save it as to the subscription. And every time the model would emit a new value, we'd just use set state to update the latest state. And then, of course, that would rebuild our widget, so we would get the latest thing. And then, of course, we have to make sure we cancel that subscription later. So, like I said, the pitfalls to me are this whole thing about managing that stream subscription yourself. And, easy to forget. Really, especially if you're in a rush and just trying to complete a feature, super easy to forget. And so I was just worried that that might be a bit bad. And so I created this thing called the stream widget. And you just implement an abstract class, and then you don't need to worry about any of that. And so in this case, we've got BMI view. It's extending stream widget. I had an init state function there. Notice this is not a state class. So yeah, Not a great design, but we're going to go with it. And then we had a dispose function directly on the widget. I don't know, this was like my first early days when I was like, I don't like state classes, I want to get rid of them. And so yeah, I kind of made this terrible API. But one nice thing is that it had a method that you would override called createStream, and it would just return the stream, and it would go ahead and manage that subscription for you. And then you just build your widget as you normally would. But it's kind of weird, because now you have almost like two init states. You have this like init state and createStream, and it was kind of confusing, like the order of operations there. And the other thing I found out very quickly is that if you were working with synchronous streams, it was totally fine, but the thing you'll realize is that Dart streams are generally async by default, which is actually different than most other platforms. And so the problem is that if you render a frame and it hasn't delivered a value, a lot of times you'll deal with a null pointer exception. And I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with this if you've been using StreamBuilder and you forget to handle the case where it doesn't have data, you'll see that exact problem. And so overall, this is a pretty terrible widget, and luckily the Flutter team, they saw I had created this, and I think they took pity upon me, and so 2 weeks later, they asked me a few questions about like what I was using it for and why I needed it, and then they built StreamBuilder and FutureBuilder, and they put that into Flutter, and that was awesome. So I was able to clean up my code a lot, I was able to get rid of Stream widget, and we had something baked into Flutter now, and that's what I sort of moved to. Now the only thing it was missing was this a way to sort of define the initial data or the initial value, which I had the ability to do in my Stream widget library to sort of handle that null pointer exception case, or handle the case where if you just don't have a value, you return like a loading spinner for like 100 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds, and it just like looks really bad. So then in that case, you could maybe deliver just a container. It got weird. So I thought it would be nice to be able to provide an initial value or initial data to a StreamBuilder so that it could start with that. So I went ahead and created a PR, and now we have a StreamBuilder. And what I was initially doing is I was passing initial data, and in the widget I was just like defining some BMI state in there. But once again, it's not clean, right? It's not clean. The whole point of this architecture is to like take data from the model and render it, right? It shouldn't like, the view shouldn't like know what data it needs or know what its initial value should be. It should just get that data from the stream or from the model layer in general. The view should be basically dumb. So back to Rx, doing more plumbing. So Frappe, as I said, had this idea of a property, which is kind of the ability to listen to a stream and it would record the latest value. And so I thought, hey, we can do that too. Rx Java and RxJS, other things like that, have similar mechanisms, and so we should go ahead and implement that. And so that's when I introduced the value observable into RxDart, and that basically allows you, and that's just an interface or an abstract class that says this is a stream that also allows you to synchronously read the latest value. And then I implemented this in a couple of different ways. First of all, I created the behavior subject, which is from RxDart and or Rx in general. And the whole idea behind this is that the behavior subject will store the latest value so you can read it synchronously. And when you subscribe to the stream, it'll actually deliver the latest value as well. And if you had a stream, you couldn't start with a behavior subject, but you wanted to convert your stream into something that was a value stream, I added the operator share value and share value seeded. And so you could sort of turn your regular stream into a value stream and provide an initial value. So back to our BMI model. So now at the end, we can just add this share value seeded and provide the initial BMI state. And this was really nice because now when we go back to our StreamBuilder, we can just say, hey, model, what is the initial value essentially for initial data? Yes, all right, 2,000 lines of code later for a one-line change. We're doing it, we're making progress, people. We are embracing this Yak Shave to another level, I think, at this point. All right, so did we make it? No, unfortunately we didn't. So it's looking pretty good in general, but the one thing that we kept seeing is that people were like super confused by this observable, and so like we would get issues. These are like direct copies of issues. Like, does RxDart observable want to follow the standard RActiveX on error contract? Maybe, I don't know, that's a good question. Can you please document the stream spec versus the observable spec? It's like, yeah, that's a fair thing, because we're calling this thing observable, but it doesn't behave like observables in other areas, so yeah, kind of confusing. Or any plans to have RxDart be more close to the canonical implementation? And so this is kind of the way I felt, basically. Yeah, we kept using the word observable, but observable didn't mean what people thought it meant, and what we thought it meant. And so we really had a bit of confusion in this case. The other thing is, we were still doing this like wrapping and casting in a lot of places. And so, for example, if you're using the block library, you were probably you might have to transform your events, right? And if you want the power from RxDart, what you'd have to do is you'd actually have to cast your state as an observable. And then you could start working with it. Or, for example, with Redux epics, what I ended up doing is that you would basically have to wrap the observable, because you weren't quite sure whether it was or wasn't an observable coming in. And so this kind of led us to a bit of a fork in the road, right? So it was an interesting problem, right? The library had started as a wrapper around RxJS, but it had kind of transformed a bit since that point. It was no longer a wrapper around RxJS. We weren't implementing the observable spec correctly, because we decided in the end that we had two options. We can either stick with the stream spec and really focus on making something that fits in naturally with the Dart world, and focus on creating something that you should just be able to use out of the box, and whether it's a Firebase stream or a stream from an HTTP request, you'll see streams all over the place in Dart. Should we stick to that spec, or should we maybe even do something more radical and write our own stream implementation or our own observable implementation? And this is actually what basically every other Rx library does. But I think what we decided, and what we really cared about, was staying close to Dart. And so we decided to say, if there was sort of a conflict or a tension between the observable or the Rx spec, which is really defined, and stream spec, we would favor the stream spec. But that still left us in an odd place where we had this thing called observable, and people expected it to work like an observable. And so that means that when there was an error, that the stream would automatically be terminated, which streams you can do that, but it's not the default. And a few other details that are really important. So what we ended up deciding to do is keep the name RxDart, but we wanted to see if we could maybe drop the observable. Now, this really wasn't possible until the last few months, which is when extension methods came out. So this is something I'd kind of been keeping my eye on for a long time. I was so excited about it when they said that they were finally going to bring it to Dart, because I'm sure a lot of us came from Android and Kotlin, and you have all your extension methods. And people were asking for this on the Dart side, but these are language features, these are big things. I wasn't sure when to expect these, or even if we could expect these at some point. But luckily, the Dart team took the feedback from the community and implemented extension methods. And this allowed us to actually drop a lot of our observable code. And so that's exactly what we did. Observable was pretty confusing for people, so we decided to go ahead and just remove that class entirely. So people don't think, hopefully, that they're working with observables. And so you can just work with the raw streams now. You can have a never stream or things like that. We were able to remove a whole bunch of tests, and I think I told this to someone yesterday, and they're like, "Wait, you removed a bunch of tests?" But don't worry, it's not these are tests that are literally just making sure that because observable had to wrap stream, we had to wrap every single method, right? Because when you transform one observable into another observable, you want to make sure you get an observable back. And so if you were just to use the base stream methods, you would only have gotten a stream back. So we had to wrap all of these methods to make sure that everything was returning an observable. And so it was really nice. We were able to get rid of all that. We actually decided to move all of the factories that were available on Observable over to this class that we just called Rx for now, because it's kind of short and concise. There was even some discussion, should we even have this class at all? But people really said that they wanted this class for the discoverability of the different types. And then the biggest thing is we were able to get rid of the observable, all the operators or the methods on the observable class, because we were able to migrate all of those into extension methods. And then I also provided a code mod, so, because this is actually a pretty big change to your code base, and if you have a large app, this would be a bit of a pain to do manually, so we created a code mod to fix that all up for you. So now, back to our Yak Shave. Okay, so we're about 3 years deep on a 5 or 8 line function, but we're looking pretty good, right? We're looking like this function's looking better now, right? Like it's looking really good. So now we don't even need to wrap this thing in an observable. We can just say like, hey, like weight stream to start with this one, and height stream to start with this one, because these extensions are available on all streams. I should have probably put more examples, but when you're using the block library, you no longer have to do like this like whole like my state as observable thing, because you just have all of these operators or methods available on the stream class. So it's really nice for so it's really nice for like a lot of libraries that were using Rx as well. But in my case, I was just super happy that I was able to take this 9-line function and turn it into a 4-line function with strong typing and no observable wrapping. So I think we made it. I think we did it. It only took 3 years. It only took about 12,000 lines of code changes, but we took that function from 9 lines to 5 lines, and it's working. That's so good, right? Like, that's so good. So that, my friends, is how you yak shave. Thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, that was awesome. Can you tell us more about that code mod that you did there at the end? Like, how does that work?
Sorry?
The code mod that you put in place to make the API changes. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, for sure. That was really cool. So, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if it's Workiva or Rika. I think it's Workiva, folks. I'm so sorry, I'm probably getting this wrong. But they encouraged me that if I was going to make this change, that it was going to be a big change for users. And they actually had created a package called, I think, Dart code mod, or just maybe even code mod. And it's a really cool little package, actually, in that it'll basically allow you to define code transformations, and you can use these, and they use the Dart analyzer under the hood, so it's not like a really crazy like regex find and replace. You can actually like visit the AST tree and do what you need to do. And so that sounds like, I don't know, I think I said this to someone yesterday, and they're like, oh yeah, just walk the AST tree, but actually the analyzer package makes it so crazy easy. And so basically what I did is I just implemented a series of AST transformations, wrote some tests for it, and then plugged it into this code mod package. And it just like, and then that package sort of takes all your transformations and turns it into a terminal app. And so it was really, actually, to be honest, it was really nice, because all I did was write unit tests to make sure that, like, you know, it was transforming the code correctly, and then I let the code mod package itself sort of handle all the terminal business and stuff like that. So yeah.
So that was a great talk, thank you. And thank you for all the work that you've done for this amazing open source project. So my question is, well, I have a background in Angular and React, and I never really, so I'm not sold on the concept of on our Rx. So can you give me like a short sales pitch on why I should use it, or why it's better than other methods that you can?
I would say use Rx when you have a problem that deserves it. To be honest with you, I would I don't know if I'd even use Rx myself these days for UI a lot of the time. Like, this was a cool experiment. I think Block was a cool experiment, but frankly, after using these for a couple of years, I think a lot of people are confused in some ways by streams. So I generally don't recommend it to beginners, but there's some really good cases. Like all technologies, you should be using the right tool for the job. And so, say for example, you want to create some sort of autocomplete experience. In that case, you're going to want to have the user type in, and you're going to want to wait 500 or something milliseconds after they pause typing to be able to actually run a callback function that should actually start fetching results. You might want to also make sure that if they type one thing in and then maybe delete a couple of characters, and that actually it's like the same thing, you don't rerun the search. And of course, you want to make sure that if someone starts typing and then the search kicks off and then they start typing again, you want to cancel those results. You can do all that with something like Scope Model or just using some of the actual tools from the async package. It has things like a cancelable operation, and you can manage a timer yourself. But that's like sort of the area, I think, where something like Rx can really help. If you have really complex transformations and like you've got a lot of events coming in and you need to transform them in a specific way, that's where I think upgrading to something like Rx is a really good idea. So I think it's really great as a utility library and to help with streams in a lot of situations. The other thing is like if you're working with like event handlers and stuff like that on the web, they're going to be streams, so you're gonna run into them as well. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a great sales pitch. Like, don't use Rx for the most part. But yeah, I would really, I'm really all about right tool for the job. So yeah.
Hey, Brian, thanks so much for your talk. You did an awesome job, and I really appreciate all the work that you put in. Just wondering what's next for RxDart. Do you have any upcoming plans or anything that you still think needs some polish or adjustments, or are you more or less happy with how it is?
Yeah, and so we're talking about 1.0 at this point, and so we've deliberately not gone to 1.0, even though I think in like 2018 someone was like, hey, could you publish 1.0? But I think we foresaw a lot of breaking changes, such as like the way our buffer and Windows operators were working. We know we wanted to change those. We'd ended up doing that. But I feel like hopefully now with these extension method changes, we should be in a pretty good spot. So I still have a couple of questions of like, should behavior subject just be called value stream controller? It's just a stream controller. That's all behavior subject is. Publish subject used to actually be helpful because it returned an observable. But now that we have all these methods everywhere, should we even have publish subject? Should there be maybe a kind of a different version of behavior subject that doesn't always replay the last value, but allows you to sort of set an initial value? Because if you already have that initial data, right now what happens is it'll render that first frame, and then the behavior subject will deliver the exact same data, re-rendering that frame. So that's not great. And share value has like a very specific way it works, which is defined by the Rx spec. And what it says is the way share value works is that when you first listen to it, it'll start listening that just fine. And then you can add multiple subscribers to it. So share value will turn even a single subscription stream into a broadcast stream. But the problem is if all of the listeners go away, it will actually shut that stream down at that point. And I think that's pretty unexpected behavior. So I've been working on a PR for something called like as broadcast value broadcast value stream, which would basically just work exactly like as broadcast stream, but allow you to define that initial seed value. So those are just some of the ideas, but yeah, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting. I'd really like actually to hear more feedback about that idea of like not using subjects anymore, because I've always, even using RxJava, I never liked the term subject, and I don't think it conveys what it's doing, whereas stream controller, like, I don't know, the first time I read that, I was like, oh, that controls a stream. So it's really, I think it's a better name. And value stream controller, it implements the value stream. So it's kind of like maybe mentally a little, you can think about this, yeah, I don't know, it's more analogous. And so I kind of, think about that stuff, so, yeah.
Thanks, Brian. My question is pretty similar, I guess. Or do you still look at Java Rx, and where do you get like new ideas for RxDart?
At this point, I would say most of the new ideas come from the community, honestly, and people filing issues. So I sort of spent like the first 6 months or something, like, hey, I need type safe combine latest, I'll fix that. And like, I needed some other things, and so I just started adding them. But it's been really cool because like, I definitely look at the Rx like Java, Swift, and JS docs, and we've like really like, I don't know, I had this like whole spreadsheet where I compared like which operators we had and which ones we were missing, and I think we're pretty close to feature complete when you combine what Stream provides plus what RxDart now provides. I think we're pretty much at feature parity, but people do write in and say like, hey, I feel like I need this or that, and it's not there. Because especially RxJS has a lot, I think, of extra operators, whereas RxJava, I think we're pretty much complete there for the most part. So yeah, but I came from Android RxJava, so yeah, I was telling someone earlier, I feel bad for the RxJS people because Dart definitely looks a lot more like Rx Java than RxJS because I came from that world, and so I'm sorry if you're a JS person. And yeah, but hey, I think here.
Thanks, Brian, for your talk. Do you think about implementing completable singles, maybes, or so on?
So yeah, we have had people ask about, especially single, but I think that's kind of a mistake, personally. Dart has a core type for asynchronous responses, and that's future. And the Stream API, thanks, already returns futures from a lot of places. And so I just didn't want to. I didn't really want to make a replacement for that. Things like maybe or I think those are actually, or like results. I think those are actually interesting ones that we could consider. But I kind of would almost prefer like some kind of union types from the Dart library, and I think that would be a better way. So it could still be a future of a union type or some. I'm not sure exactly yet, but my personal opinion is that I've been hesitant to embrace those because we already have, especially single, because we have future, and I just think it would once again kind of lead us back into that other problem we had with observable, and is that people thought it was the Rx observable and it had those exact properties. Same thing I think would happen if we introduced single. It would work differently than futures, or it might be an extension of a future. So, all right, and so I'm being told to wrap it up. We got the Oscar music playing. Thank you so much again. I'll be out there. So yeah, let's chat.